15. The Marriage Covenant. The fact that marriage is a covenant is too seldom recognized or appreciated. Some marriage vows still include the covenantal reference, as witness the order in the Presbyterian Book of Common Worship, which requires both bride and groom to declare in their vows, "I do vow and covenant before God and these witnesses." The modern outlook is alien to marriage as a covenant. A man-centered emphasis will see marriage as a purely human sexual arrangement, and it will as readily dispense with marriage if it interferes with a humanistic sexuality. In the Bible, however, marriage is a covenant. 2 verses in particular pinpoint the biblical doctrine. "When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee, to deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flattereth with her words, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God." Proverbs chapter 2, verses 10 and 11, verses 16 and 17. "Yet ye say, Wherefore? Because the Lord hath been witness between thee and the wife of thy youth, against whom thou hast dealt treacherously. Yet is she thy companion, and the wife of thy covenant." Malachi chapter 2, verse 14. The adulterous wife in Proverbs chapter 2, verse 16 following is referred to as a, quote, stranger, end quote. This does not mean that she is an alien or a foreigner, but rather that, by her adultery, she has become an outsider to the covenant of God, an outlaw. She has sinned against the covenant of God. This is reference, as Kidner pointed out, to God's covenant with Israel, including in its obligations the 7th commandment. The reference is not to the marriage covenant, but to God's covenant with Israel, and to God's covenant law. "Thou shalt not commit adultery." Exodus chapter 20, verse 14, Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 18. Because God the Creator has entered into covenant with man, with Adam, Noah, Moses, and Israel, all men are therefore under the covenant law. All men either obey it or else they are judged by it. However, every area of life and thought is governed by God's covenant and is subordinate to it. In some of these areas, subordinate covenants exist by God's requirement. That is, the civil covenant, the church covenant, and the marriage covenant. No more than we can step outside of God and His government can we step outside of His covenant. God's law and government are coterminous with Him. In Malachi chapter 2, verse 14, the meaning is different. Marriage is here seen as a covenant to which the Lord was witness. It is the subordinate covenant, marriage, that is in view, and God is the key witness to that covenant. Our concern here is not a discussion of the laws of marriage and divorce. Rather, the key fact is that marriage is a covenant subordinate to God's covenant and its law. The laws governing marriage must therefore be derived exclusively from the law of God, biblical law. There are differences between the Orthodox believers of various churches as to the interpretation of the biblical laws governing marriage. However, all who are Orthodox are agreed that God's law must prevail. Marriage, however, is, in the modern world, a civil contract. This is a very important and revolutionary fact. True, in most, quote, democracies, end quote, a religious service can supplement that civil ceremony, or the marriage covenant made by a pastor can be ratified by a state license. There is, all the same, a key fact here. In the political realm, humanism has replaced the theological covenant with God by a humanistic civil contract. The governing fact in such a civil contract is the will of the two parties with the concurrence of the state. God's law is replaced by human will. Let us go a step further. A major fact of the Reformation era was the charge made with respect to the sacraments, reduced from 7 to 2. Among those things declassified as a sacrament was marriage. There were sound theological reasons for this, as well as some errors. A sacrament is defined usually as an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. Many would add that this sign is one ordained by God in the Old Testament and by Christ in the New. No church has won the argument over sacraments because it is all too easy to stretch or limit the definition. Thus, 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 7 speaks of husband and wife in their godly union as being heirs together of the grace of life. Does this make marriage a sacrament? Both Catholics and Protestants subscribe to 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 7, but they classify its meaning differently. I do not say this in order to give assent to the Catholic view of sacraments by any means. Rather, the point is that an abstract definition leads to problems, whereas to say, we do what the Lord commands us to do, does not. Clearly, marriage makes us heirs together of the grace of life. Marriage can become a means of grace. Having said this, we must add that all life in faithfulness to God's covenant makes us heirs of grace. This, however, does not obliterate the distinction between an ordinary family meal and the Last Supper. Catholics, by calling marriage a sacrament, sought to stress its role as a means of grace. Puritanism, by its strong emphasis on the family, worked to implement the role of family life as a means of grace. It would perhaps be more fruitful to speak of covenant ordinances or rites, baptism and communion, and of all life in the covenant as a life of grace and an heirship in grace. Clearly, marriage, a subordinate covenant, is a means of grace, according to 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 7. Marriage as a covenant means that the man and woman are subordinate to God and His covenant. While God is mindful of the welfare and comfort of a man and woman, the point of marriage is not their self-satisfaction, but His calling. Eve was created and given to Adam to be a helpmeet, Genesis chapter 2 verse 18, in His calling. They were together to serve God. Because theirs was a covenant relationship, it was a legal relationship, because the covenant is a treaty of law. As such, God, as a suzerain, determines the purpose and meaning of the relationship. Rome governed marriages for reasons of state and in the belief that public welfare required the protection of marriage. By public welfare, in essence, state welfare was in mind. From reasons of state, a man-centered view, we have moved to an even more radical humanism, marriage for reasons of private will. Freud once observed of his own marriage that it was a good solution to the sex question. On similarly, totally personal grounds, many have since felt that the abandonment of marriage is the better solution to the sex problem. The civil contract has become the purely personal contract. In ancient paganism, while God's covenant was denied, marriage still retained a covenantal nature. Blood was shed to make the marriage covenant, and a cup of wine, symbolizing blood, was shared by the bride and groom to seal the covenant. Many of these ancient practices survived in Christian form, and the marriage covenant was placed in the context of the covenant of God. In one of the most ancient bits of Scottish minstrelsy, we read, Jock took Ginny by the hand, and cried and feast, and slew and cock, and made a bridal up a land. Now have I gotten you, Ginny, quoth Jock. Marriage, in this sense, also meant an entrance into authority. Macrobius, a Roman and possibly a Christian, writing circa AD 440 to 420 AD, commented concerning the bride, "For on the first day of a marriage, the bride is in retirement, but on the next day, she must begin to assume authority in her husband's house and offer sacrifice." This reminds us of Proverbs chapter 31, verses 10 following, and the virtuous wife. The civil contract concept changed the focus of marriage from God's calling to human satisfaction. In terms of this, the modern era has seen the wife become merely an ornament, and with, quote, woman's liberation, end quote, seek her own separation from the contract. From a contract for the man's pleasure, it has become a contract for mutual satisfaction and to be broken upon dissatisfaction. Between the world of the covenant and that of the contract, there is a world of difference.